Hello, everyone. My name is Sergi Serrat. I come from Barcelona, and I'm teaching at the architecture department at DAP. Actually, John, he ruined me. You ruined my presentation, or maybe you were just introducing to it because I would like to talk a little bit today about thermodynamic architecture. That is this topic about how do we move the design discussion from the mechanics into the thermodynamics. And actually, behind this fancy name, there is nothing more than a particular strategy related to a design attitude based on the recovery of our lost memory as architects. Because actually, architects, we are working on a very reduced, or we are simplifying things too much. And actually, when it comes to the electromagnetic spectrum, we have been reducing things to only work with the visible side of it. And we are been delegating the rest of the frequency to engineers. And that's also why we have a bad reputation, but also this is why our buildings, they don't really work anymore. And actually, this is the beginning of the modern movement for architecture. Le Corbusier, with this sentence about the definition of architecture and the relation with light, is this kind of very solemn and very important and abstract understanding that architecture is this skillful, rigorous, and magnificent play of volumes under light, but then, of course, only under the visible part of that spectrum. And actually, it's interesting because Le Corbusier, he was comparing in his book Towards an Architecture, he was showing this extremely ancient architecture compared to these ultra-modern machines. And that's the beginning of the mechanization of architecture, because he said that machines had to be implemented in buildings in order to transport this new society from the dirty past into the brilliant future. And actually, machines, they have been taking control so much that suddenly today it seems a very good idea to build these glass towers in the middle of the desert. Because actually, if we look at them from a quantitative point of view, they work. If we relate them to these kind of green labels that are some kind of green marketing strategies to make us feel better about what we do. The Burj Khalifa in Dubai, it's a good building because it has a LEED Gold certification, and gold is a word that we like a lot. It's better than silver. Even it just gets 61 points out of the 100 of 10 possible. So I think this is leading us to a very difficult situation, and we are reaching this point of, okay, the party is over, and we need to start discussing how this mechanic architecture is really influencing the way we talk about buildings. And then Cedric Price, a lot of years ago, he said, okay, technology is the answer, but then what is the question? And I think that thermodynamic architecture, it's about the redefinition of the question. And actually, this is an image that illustrates. So because both of those pictures, they talk about the same thing. This is about pleasure, this is about relief, this is about comfort, this is about delight. The difference is how each picture is reaching that point. So the image to the left, that's dominated by a machine. So this space, it's always going to be able to provide some kind of illusion of comfort, even if the building is poorly implemented. This is a discussion about how much energy this building is going to need. On the picture of the right, which is from a Spanish painter, here, if we look at the picture, we see something that is dominated by the environment. So we see something that there are elements and spaces that are able to adjust to light, to airflow, to temperature, to sun, to evaporation. We see open doors, we see vegetation, we see blinds and tendrils, and we see thermal mass and thermal effusivity, and we see people wearing proper clothes. So at the end, the light is reached just because there is this balance and this interdependence between environment, architecture, and users. And actually, this is the problem of mechanic architecture, is that mechanic architecture has detached climate from space, allowing architects to cheat and just be concerned about this kind of visual aspect of architecture / ego, whatever you want to call it, right? And again, we delegate the rest of the discipline to the engineer, and we forget about it. And actually, the sustainable discourse, it has fixed it a little bit by bringing back some of those parameters related to the environmental impact on buildings. But again, as I was saying before, the emphasis is very much on energy consumption, which is just yet another more efficient machine. And again, the discussion on sustainability today is reduced to this kind of green marketing solution, with a discussion that it's focused on quantities, but not so much on qualities. Thermodynamic architecture is to go radical in the idea of quality and actually understand buildings not as objects, but more as processes that they reveal this kind of all, because everything that I'm showing here is very old. So all those kind of all dynamic relationships between nature, architecture, and user. And then the aesthetic discussion, which is there, and we were discussing about this yesterday during the dinner. At the end, the aesthetic discussion is just an atmospheric representation of climatic control that is not the same as climatic uniformity. Okay, this building is pure climatic uniformity. That's not climatic control. So at the end, the discussion, the thermodynamic discussion, proposed this change from closed to open climatic systems. Is this idea that we need to change buildings from bubbles to clouds. Okay, so because that's the paradox of today's architecture, is that according to standards, according to code, the most efficient building today is the one that is completely isolated from nature. Because all these exchanges with the exterior, not with energy, air, and water, they are done through mechanic components. And actually, the idea of the bubble is this kind of perfect, tight, super insulated, efficient skin that it's going to support life no matter what with the help of a machine. So actually, we are building astronaut suits that they could keep life on Earth, on the moon, or under the water. It doesn't matter. So this doesn't feel completely right. I mean, I think this building is a very good example of an astronaut suit or a bubble. The idea of the cloud represents this kind of more dynamic relationship, or is this kind of real-time behavior to all those external energy flows and environmental conditions that they are usually happening around the perimeter of the building, but they also happen at the core. So at the end, thermodynamic architecture is nothing more than this kind of resilient structures that can adapt to the environment, to the physical phenomena, and most important, to the users. I think bringing the user into the equation is essential to understand this. And actually, there are three main parameters, design parameters, that I talk in my design studios and I talk in my practice to reach this kind of thermodynamic behavior. The first one is related to time. The second one is related to the idea of behavior. And the third is related to the parameter of freedom. And then the relationship between natural environment, artificial environment, and human beings are regulated by those three parameters. So at the end, if we think about time is a parameter that has a lot of scales. We can design considering hours and human interactions. We can design considering seasons, which would be climatic interactions. And we can design considering years. And then we need to incorporate the idea of building reuse. The idea of behavior that can be understood as climatic control is this kind of definition through the perimeter of the building of these contingent relationships between architecture and climate through what we call tectonics. That tectonics is the relation between structure and envelope. And finally, the idea of freedom, that can also be called calculated uncertainty, is this kind of necessary consequence of those two previous parameters. And it's about moving architecture away from the tyranny of functioning architecture, that this is just an idea that appears with the mechanic vision of architecture. The idea of function is totally new. It's not even 100 years old. But today we are totally obsessed with this idea of form follows function, that it's kind of insane. So all these ideas of freedom, of time, of behavior, this is not new at all. The Eames on the 50s, they were describing architecture as this kind of neutral container where everything should be possible through human interaction, and then architecture should be neutral and generic and just allow people to do stuff. Cedric Price imagined his fan palace as this kind of place of calculated uncertainty where he only defined structure and envelope and then allow program to change anytime according to users. George Perec, he describes those species of spaces, and he has a very interesting paragraph where he talks, I don't understand why spaces are related to functions, because we could really relate it to something much more interesting, like as our body senses, or the days of the week, or temperature, or months of the year. And actually, this is what Philip Ram is doing. He's defining installations of space where people use spaces not based on functions, but on temperatures. And then it's based on temperatures and motions. And I'm going to show you a project that we are working on at the office that it's dealing with this quite a lot. So at the end, thermodynamics is this kind of fundamental step forward in the design of spaces for human beings. And it's about giving control back to users. And it's about giving control back to nature through architecture. It's this idea of going back to normal, because this has been working in this way, the interaction of humans and nature through architecture. That's the core foundation of architecture. Other than that, it's not architecture, it's something else. And actually, these implications of an architecture that it's free of formal and functional predetermination, that it's sensitive to the passage of time, that it's in balance with nature, that can adjust to our needs, that it's a tool for our pursuit of delight, it's really endless. It's what we were discussing before. Why are not we doing these lectures outside, that the day it's so fantastic? It's just because the architect didn't design a space there with a screen. Otherwise, we will all be outside. And it will be much better than listening to this machine that is like, no, anyway. So, and then this same idea also opens the door to so many different ways of using those spaces that are yet to be defined. Because with this, we also challenge the notion of family, or we also challenge the notion of patriarchy, or we also challenge the notion of capitalism. So I think thermodynamics, it's this kind of strategic tool that allows us to do all these kind of things. Because at the end, it's not about how buildings look like, or it's not even about how buildings perform. It's very much about this idea about how buildings behave, because buildings, the same as people, they are allowed to behave. We can have a dynamic change or dynamic relationship with things that are all around us. So for me, in one sentence, thermodynamic would be this intersection between architecture, climate, and energy. And to finish, I'm just going to show you one project that we're doing at the office, that it's this combination of time, freedom, and climatic control that allows us to define a building with thermal gradients instead of programs. So this is a building that it's in Barcelona. It's a public building. It's a building for social activities. It's some kind of civic center that doesn't have a specific program. We designed the building. I mean, it does have a program. I mean, the municipality, they do have a list of activities, but the way we designed this building is very generic. It's a building that it's arranged on stripes, and it's arranged on boxes of different sizes. But there is no single function applied to all those spaces. The only thing that we do is that we say, okay, everything that is dynamic goes into the stripes. Everything that is static goes into the boxes. So the first thing that we do is that we define the thermal envelope of the building. So we decide to leave all the stairs, all the elevators, all the bathrooms non-insulated, doesn't matter. This way, we are already reducing 10% the energy consumption of the building in a strategic way. But then what we do is this. We define 3 different temperatures: exterior temperature, intermediate temperature, and interior temperature. We link those different colors to passive or active ways of climatizing those spaces. So the blue is not climatized at all, it's exterior. The orange is passively climatized through greenhouse effects, through cross ventilation. We have like a simple fans, and then we have we have high thermal masses that are activated by some kind of radiant floor in case we need that. But all this is very slow and very bioclimatic. The red boxes, they are active, they are highly insulated, they are done with timber, so they don't have any thermal mass, and they are climatized by individual HVAC systems that they can be turned on and off depending on the activity that whoever wants to do at that moment in the small box or in the big box or in the intermediate box want to do. And with this, we design the whole building. And actually, all this we support, and this is the change between contemporary architecture and vernacular architecture, is that all those strategies, we don't really trust on tradition to execute them, but we have tools today that are able to make the invisible visible, and they are going to allow us to simulate airflows, or they allow us to simulate light intensity. So with these physical drawings, we really design and combine and create the conditions of the envelope that it can be open and closed. So at the end, you always have the feeling that you are in a very low-tech space with very little amount of pipes and conducts, the same as this building. And this space at the end is dominated by sun, is dominated by shadow, is dominated by cross-ventilation, and the possibility of you as individual to move inside or outside, to open the windows, depending on how do you feel about it and how the day is. And actually, this is the last service that the building is gonna do, which is to be born again. And this is an exercise that we all should do, so create some kind of generic spaces, because the most sustainable new building is the one that is never going to be built. And with this, I finish. So this is like the reformulation 100 years later. We can leave Le Corbusier to rest. I mean, and probably we can define architecture as the art of building climate. And maybe that's my question to you, is what's your own definition, or what's your own understanding of architecture? So yeah, thank you. Anyone?
How long has this project that you're working on been in process?
Well, we want that. No, this is a very long project because it has been stopped by economy and so on and so forth. But it's ready to go into construction now. But we don't know where it's going to be built. But there are several buildings that they operate in the same way. So we are not the first.
Okay, so you do have the feedback on how it's working.
Not from us, but there are other buildings that, yes, they allow.
How much do you think about renovation compared to new construction? And if there's just low-hanging fruit for renovating existing spaces to make them more in line with your ideas?
Yeah, actually, all buildings, they work very well on thermodynamic conditions because the construction is more serious. I mean, all buildings, they are usually built with materials, and new buildings are built with products. And products are terrible because they become very specialized layers in a very complex sequence that they will not last. And when they fail, you don't know which layer it's failing, and to change that layer. So a good brick wall that is thick enough, that's everything you need to operate thermodynamically. So yes, the future is to really take those buildings back. Also because the logic of construction of former materials, they really go very well with this idea of non-functionalization of spaces, because at that time, that didn't make any sense. So yeah, they are fantastic buildings.
Thanks for your presentation. I really enjoyed the shared differences, especially with what you say and stuff. I'm hearing something about our ability to move indoors and outdoors and open and close, and something in that seems to indicate somewhere the responsibility of the user or the human or the creature to participate in this modulation. So it's not just about like a luxury space where everything is defined and you can just be in the matrix, but it's like there's some amount of discipline involved in being able to inhabit a building that is not fully air conditioned, that has its limitations. Is that where you're alluding to as well?
Yeah, totally. I think that the problem is that we are not giving this option anymore, and we don't think about it. But as soon as we are sensitive to this condition, suddenly everything changes, and then code changes, and then engineers change, and then everything changes. But it's just that we don't really. No, we take what is given to us. And then we also, because they tell us, no, this is a very efficient building. This is green, LEED, platinum. And then, okay, this is a fantastic building. Then I can be really satisfied. No, we need to be responsible for that, and we need to be active for that. And I don't know, this is a general, I don't know, we are sharing with John and Chris, we have these discussions about before people, they were able to do more things. And now we are just passive consumers of whatever is given to us. So why do we accept this? I don't know, we have time? Well, you can.
Sorry. So when the animals build structures, like antennas or other things, like that, do they follow one of these principles? Like, can you say they're building something without a function, or that's open to multiple use, or so it seems to me that's very functionally oriented. It has a particular thing that it's built for. Are we kind of departing from that?
No, because I think animals, the function is to provide shelter. I mean, usually you have three types of thermodynamic spaces. The first one is your body, right? The second one is your clothing. The third one is architecture. So usually when your body is not enough, you dress clothes. When your clothes are not enough, you need a construction. Animals, the clothing part, they don't have. They have fur or they don't. But then as soon as the environment is going beyond their own limits of comfort, they create either because the first construction is not, I mean, the first possible construction is to use a cave, right? So either, and that's the problem of architecture. Ancient times, you found a cave, you go into the cave, maybe there is a lion inside the cave. So as soon the animals, they do the same thing, I guess. They go into the cave, if someone kicks them out, then they build a nest. But the nest is optimized in this relation of sheltering, but it's not an aesthetic, it's not a celebration of aesthetics, or it's not a place where, okay, here is where you lay your eggs, and here is where you look into the landscape. And you are not told those things. It's a space that somehow adapts to that. So yeah, animals are really, they optimize things. But animals, they work with this kind of collective memory. I don't know how to define it. Today we have the tools to really make those things available for us to design.
Just going to comment with your temperature gradients, maybe with light gradients, and then comment about users. The problem right now is pheromones for the elderly, where there's no light signaling, no access to outdoor light, and these folks they rely on their caregivers to move them a lot of the time, and this can compound the effects of Alzheimer's. There might be natural signal, obviously, and then they start to recycle more. So yeah, I was looking for a caramel for my family. I would look at lighting and their natural light. I thought that would be the first thing I look at. Your design kind of
yeah, but again, I think it really connects with our common sense, right? I want a space that is light, that it's comfortable, but I don't want a space that it's cool, or I don't want a space that has a label, whatever that means, or I don't want a space that, no, I mean, I think the idea of experience is very related to common sense. I think we all can easily connect with this idea. And yes, I totally agree with you. What?
So actually, I just had a comment on the question that last year about the animals. There's a guy at Syracuse University, Scott Serrat. He works with termites and termite farms. And what he's found is that African termites are pretty mounted at 8, 10, 12 feet tall, and they make holes in them. And the holes are made so that, given the pressure of the wind, the inside temperature is very steady throughout the year, even though it can vary a lot outside.
Yeah. Well, that's true, but also what is important is that termites build with earth, and earth is one of the best materials to really behave thermodynamically. We are all very obsessed with mass timber buildings today. They don't provide a very good thermodynamic answer. They are good in other stuff, but that's a different discussion. But yeah, earth construction is fantastic. Thank you.